Sanbonani, hello, how's it, shalom. Welcome to, well, as you can see, Piet Retief, aka the Mkondo local municipality. We are here as the Big Daddy Liberty Show, as promised, to talk to ordinary residents of this town. There's a lot of noise, a lot of raucous activity here in the town, primarily, of course, by the party political groupings that are here. We saw today, and I'll roll that image probably as I talk, you know, the EFF, ANC, and even some IFP throngs here outside the court. I'm standing right outside the court itself, and but again, as I said in the run-up to why I was coming here, we're not necessarily focused too much on what's happening in that courthouse at the moment, or actually what is being said or done by the party political types on just the other side of me. You can probably hear their music blaring in the background. You might even hear the faint hum of the police chopper, which has been doing its rounds as we've been here. There's a massive police contingent, barbed wire everywhere, police on every street corner. The cops, it must be said, and all credit to them, came very prepared for what happened here, because, you know, there are scenes, and there were scenes before, of violence breaking out and, you know, even destruction of property here. You know, shop owners reporting windows being broken, and in the case of some, you know, that reportage that we had with Gabriel Crouse last week Wednesday, you saw even images of his vehicle and other vehicles having been destroyed. I'm just going to ask the camera lady to hold that thought as I pick up a, I'm assuming is a rubber bullet casing here, but this in and of itself tells the tale of what happened here last week. So I do understand why the police would have come fully prepared this time to deal with what was the violence here meted out by some of these political formations. But as I said, we're not here for that. We're not here for the party politics or for the police or any of that. We're here for ordinary residents of this area, and to ask them three questions broadly. Number one, what are their thoughts on the party politics descending on the town? We've seen images like these out in Senekal, was it last year or earlier this year, I forget. And you had similar images in other parts of the country, small town South Africa, where such cases have happened. Coligny is a good example. So what do they think as they watch these mostly outsiders, because a lot of these people were bussed in. These are not locals in this area. What do they think when they descend on an area and shut a town down like this? That's the first real question I want to get into with them. And the second being, you know, their thoughts on the case itself. You know, we're not really going to ask people to go into the merits of it, because really those facts are still coming out. So what do ordinary people think about what's happening in this particular court case? And lastly, have the politicians who've come here to capitalize on this incident, have they been a net positive or a negative according to residents? So you're watching the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Remember, if you want to support the show, all of the details are in the link of the video. It is your contributions that have gotten me out here, so I super appreciate that. As little as $1 a month. But with that being said, let's get straight into it. Let's talk to the residents of Piet Retief. Gabriel, it is a very interesting day. We're at the end of what is the third day of this trial. That is the bail hearing. Big revelations today. What happened inside that courtroom?
So the big thing that happened today is that the defense disclosed that there is security camera fixed video footage of what built up to the death of the Coka brothers. Now, it must just be clear, this is not of the scene where they died.
Yeah.
It's of the scene before the scene.
Okay.
On the state's version, what happened there is that 7 unarmed peaceful work seekers arrived and then were confronted by these farmers and farm workers, and then one of them was illegally kidnapped. And then the second scene was when people they ran away, and then they came back with more to find where the person had been kidnapped, tied under a tree. And it was in trying to relieve him that violence then emerged and 2 were shot dead. That's the state's version. On the accused version, what happened at this first incident is that 4 people armed with sticks arrived and harassed workers, and then one struck Mr. Potgieter with a knobkiri to the head, and then that's why a citizen's arrest was made. And then the police were called. We've had confirmation in court that the police were called at 11, just before 11 a.m. And the killings happened much later. We also had confirmation from the warrant officer that if the police had arrived timeously, the Coka brothers would both still be alive today. This was on any version. Okay, so but on the accused version, it's a citizen's arrest, and then guys come back and try and disrupt that, and then one strikes Hans Moolman with the steel pipe to the head, gets his gun, shoots wildly, or shoots somehow, shoots his brother, and then himself is shot in self-defense. Now the big revelation of the day was the video footage disclosed by the defense. And that footage was viewed by the defense and the state's attorney and by the chief investigating officer. And as he described it to the court, there were some material contradictions between that and the first version. That's the state's version. Firstly, on the state's version, there were these 7 innocent, peaceful, unarmed people. But the warrant officer agreed that was incorrect because they arrived, you can see in the video, armed with sticks.
And that's a major concession by the warrant officer on the stand.
That is a major concession. The even bigger concession is that he was told by these witnesses that during the first altercation, Amos Coka, he went into the farm and then was pulled back by his own accomplices who said, no, you can't go in there. If you go in there, you will be killed. But the video shows that didn't happen. What did happen is that one of the farm workers pushed him out and that they got in a scuffle and a fight. So he wasn't taken back by his own friends. And moreover, it shows that the person who pushed him out was his brother, Zenzele Coka. So you had this altercation between 2 brothers, one who still works at the farm, who is still loyal to the farm, who is trying to keep the peace. Another, according to the defense, who has come to make trouble. And of course, that ties in with the accused's version that later on, it is Amos Coka who then shoots his brother, Zenzele, dead.
Gabriel, that is a massive, massive, massive development to happen today. Clearly, a massive win for the defense of these 5 men. The state now has it all to do.
Yeah, there is a lot left for the state to do. It's going to have to show that perhaps the risk of releasing the 5 accused on bail is so great to security in this area and national security that they should be kept behind bars just to keep the peace. Now that's going to be a difficult argument to make, but the state has indicated that it will make that argument, and the chief investigating officer has supported that argument. So that's one line to deny bail. The other thing that the state is looking to do, from what it's said in court, is introduce more evidence about previous incidents implicating the farmers and farm workers on Pampoen Kraal. And not just there, but also in Newcastle, but the same people.
Right.
And so people who've been following the story will have seen a special assignment documentary on 2 alleged murders that took place in the area. They will have seen allegations that cattle were poisoned deliberately, and the state is also the state hasn't actually touched on those directly, but it is bringing forward allegations that there's a pending investigation of malicious damage to property by one of the accused in Newcastle, in and around Newcastle, which would show, perhaps the state is going to argue, that they haven't been honest with the police in their dealings. And that, together with the claims that if you let these accused go, they're going to intimidate workers or intimidate witnesses, will be another reason to try and deny them bail. And that, together with the fact that the guns were not immediately released to the police, they will use that to try and suggest that the accused are not cooperative, and that you can't take them at their word, because all of them have now sworn that they will cooperate with the investigations. Now that they've had legal counsel, they're very eager to cooperate, but the state will argue that that's not the case. Those are going to be difficult arguments to make, but they will be made, and we will investigate them.
Absolutely. Dude, thank you for your time. And, you know, as you were monitoring things inside court, we were trying to talk to ordinary residents here in Piet Retief, the town center, and it, to be brutally honest, is a ghost town. It is a town dominated right now by police, you know, media, mainstream media in particular, and of course the 3 political parties we saw being represented here, the ANC, EFF and IFP. Clearly that's had an impact on local residents, perhaps avoiding the inner town itself. So unfortunately I was unable to bring you interviews from local residents for the obvious reason they're not here, but You just heard it from Gabriel himself, giving you an update on that case. If you want to read the piece that I was referring to in particular, it is on the Daily Friend. That's www.dailyfriend.co.za. After the short break, we wrap up the show. So I'm super lucky. I'm super lucky. Just as I was leaving, I got an opportunity to meet with two chaps who live and work in this area. They are farm workers in the areas, guys who call this part of the world home, and they've lived here their entire lives. They knew the Coka brothers, and you know, they are a part, as I said, of the community. But really, I only asked them one question, which is, with the images I showed you earlier on, of a town centre that is a public space for all residents here, black or white, with that town centre now being taken over by the political types, as you saw earlier on, when that town centre is taken over by people who trash and you know, destroy public infrastructure in that town, when that town centre is taken over by the police and all of these institutions, how does that make them feel? Does that change the mood of the area? So I wanted to pose that question to them, and we had this short chat just before I left Piet Retief. Bobhuti, ngiyabonga kakhulu. Yazi ngiphuma khona edolobheni la Piet Retief besishutha sihlose ngempela ukukhuluma nabantu bala Piet Retief ukuthi babona kanjani bona njengoba idolobha lapha manje sigcwele osopolitiki, ugcwele abantu abagqoka imfanekiso ye-ANC, abanye EFF, abanye IFP. Uthi ngempela nina njengabahlali bendawo nizizwa kanjani minibona idolobha lenu sigcwele osopolitiki? Ngabe baze lana ngokunisiza noma nobona kanjani?
Thina ngibona kwethu indlela okwenzeka ngayo ayisasixolisi, ayisasijabulisi. Because manje lento le, it's about now political issues. Asilento esifisayo ngabe siyayibona of senze umthetho ukuthi uthathe indawo yawo. Sesibona ukuthi ngazathi osopolitiki nama-media asezoxabanisa, sesi about black and white. Ayisekho ngendlela thina ungabe ubulungiswa kwenzeka ngayo. Sekuningisho nathi asisekho happy ngendlela okwenzeka ngayo, and asijabulile.
Futhi kembe ngibeke nje ukugcina umbuzo kuwena, ngokubona kwakho yini okufanele kwenzeke ukuze ubudlelwano benu njengamalunga omphakathi bendawo bube ngcono? Ningenza njani? Yini eningathanda ukukubona ukuze ubudlelwano bendawo buqine?
Cha, thina singathanda ukuthi sikubone ukuze ubudlelwano bethu buzoqina, ukuthi abantu labo bama-politics kanje abeme kancane kuzo zonke lezinto, kube abantu bomthetho abadlala indima yabo, basebenzisane bodwa, kubonakale ukuthi kuphethe kabi. Ngoba njengathi nje sihleli la, wanathi asisaphephile, asisazizwa siphephile, isimo sesi-strong kakhulu.
Ay, no, ngiyabonga kakhulu. Mangathatha isikhathi seni kakhulu, ngiyabonga kakhulu. Well, there you have it. That is the end of this episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Unfortunately, we did not get the opportunity to chat to the ordinary residents of Piet Retief, simply because, rightly also, they did not go and venture into the middle of town. Why? Well, you saw why. There were throngs, mobs at times of party-clad, individuals in, again, I don't want to call them protesters, because if you look at what happened in the previous iteration, or the previous time, they were in the town centre, there was a trail of destruction and violence left in there. So that I don't blame the residents of Piet Retief for not wanting to put themselves in harm's way. Of course, political parties, like any other citizen, should have the right to free speech. But sadly, what we've seen from these political parties when they capitalize on tragic incidents like these is that they use these incidents to drive their race narrative, their race-based narratives, in order to sow division in these communities. And I don't think the community of Piet Retief were interested in not only the narrative side of things, but also potentially being a victim again from stone hurling and even stabbings that happened in on the last incident. So a special thank you to Gabriel Crouse, who is the Daily Friend journalist who was in the court covering things. He gave us a lovely synopsis on what is happening here. Super appreciate that from him, and I super appreciate you for watching this episode. Hopefully when I come back to Piet Retief, hopefully, excuse me, to do a follow-up piece, I'll be able to speak to you, the resident of this part of the world. So super appreciate that. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for watching. If you want to support the Big Daddy Liberty Show and my work and help me get around to locations like these, please make sure you look at the descriptor of this video, and you can support this show for as little as $1 a month, either on Patreon, PayPal, or a direct EFT contribution. The information, excuse me, is in the descriptor of this video. Thank you for watching, and a reminder to you to never trust a commie